Frustrated Reader Level 2 The Call of the Wild Introduction And Buck really was crazy now. He had fire in his eyes and he wanted to kill. In the end, Buck couldn't stand up, he couldn't see or hear. He was almost dead. In this way, Buck's new life in the cold north of Canada begins. He has to learn many new things, and the lessons are hard. But Buck is a strong, intelligent dog, and he wants to live. Buck meets dangerous men and dogs in this difficult, snowy country. He changes because he has to change. But can he really be happy there? The life of Jack London from 1876 to 1916 was as interesting as his books. His family didn't have any money and he wasn't happy with life in Pennsylvania. His great love when he was a child was reading. London left school when he was 15 years old and he visited other places in the United States. He had many different jobs, but he never had much money. In 1896, he heard about the gold in northwest Canada. He went there because he wanted a new life and he wanted to find gold. He met many interesting people and animals. He left the Yukon 3 years later without any gold, but with the idea for a good story. This was The Call of the Wild. Two of his other books about the cold north are White Fang and The Son of the Wolf. London was very famous and he made a lot of money from his books, but he always had money problems and he drank. He died at the age of 40. People around the world love his stories about the lives of the people and animals of the North. Chapter 1 To the North. Buck was a strong dog with a thick coat. He lived in a big house, Mr. Miller's place, in sunny California. There were tall trees around the house, and there was a pool too. Buck was 4 years old, and the Millers were his family. He swam with the boys and walked with the women. He carried the babies on his back, and at night, Buck sat at Mr. Miller's feet. There were other dogs at Mr. Miller's house, but Buck was the most important. He was the boss there, and he was very happy. That year, 1897, was an exciting year. Some men found gold in the cold Arctic north of Canada, and a lot of people followed them there. Everybody wanted gold, and they wanted dogs, strong dogs with thick coats. The dogs had to pull the gold through the snow to towns and rivers. But Buck didn't know about the cold north or gold, and he didn't know about Manuel. Manuel worked for Mr. Miller, but he always wanted more money. I can sell Buck, he thought. He's strong. Somebody will pay a lot of money for him. One day, Mr. Miller was at work and the children were busy. Manuel put a rope around Buck's neck and left the house quietly. He met a man at a train station, and the man gave him money for a dog. Buck didn't like this new man, and he started to bark. So the man pulled the rope around his neck very hard. This hurt Buck, and it made him angrier. He tried to fight the man, but the man pulled the rope again. The pain was very bad. Buck fell to the ground and his eyes closed. He opened his eyes when a loud noise woke him. he was on a train, and there was that man again. Buck was very hungry and thirsty, and he hated the rope around his neck. He jumped up and tried to attack the man, but the man was quick and pulled the rope. Buck's neck hurt very badly. Then the man put him in a box. "Crazy animal," he said. When they arrived in San Francisco, the man left Buck in his box at the bar. The next morning, 4 other men arrived and put Buck in a car. He barked angrily at them, but they only laughed. He was in the box in a car for 2 days and 2 nights without food or water. He hated his box and he hated the men. He wanted to kill somebody. After a long time, they arrived in Seattle. 4 men carried the box to a house and gave it to a man in a red shirt. This man had a club in his hand and he looked at Buck. "Okay, I'll get you out of that box now," he said. He started to open the box carefully. Buck jumped up and barked. "Now, you crazy dog," the man said. And Buck really was crazy now. He had fire in his eyes and he wanted to kill. He jumped at the man. 140 pounds of angry, crazy dog. But the man suddenly hit him very hard with the club. Buck fell to the ground and barked. Then he attacked again. Again, the man hit him, and again Buck fell to the ground. The pain was very bad. 12 times he attacked, and 12 times the man hit him. In the end, Buck couldn't stand up. He couldn't see or hear. He was almost dead. "That will teach him," shouted one of the men. Buck slowly woke up and looked at the man with the red shirt. The man read from a paper on the Buck's box. "So, your name's Buck?" "Buck, my boy," he said quietly. "We had a little fight and now we can forget about it. You know that I am the boss. Be a good dog and we'll be friends. I kill bad dogs. Do you understand?" He brought Buck some food and water. Buck ate and drank quickly. He learned a lesson that day. He learned the lesson of the club and he never forget it. One day, a small French-Canadian man came and looked at Buck. His name was Perrault. "Wow, he's a big, strong dog. How much do you want for him?" $300, answered the man in the red shirt. This was a wonderful dog for the cold north, Perrault thought. He's strong and his coat is thick and warm. He bought Buck and another dog, Curly, and he took the 2 dogs to a boat. Buck never saw the man in the red shirt or the warm south again. On the boat, the 2 dogs met François, another French-Canadian. He and Perrault were kind and intelligent, and they understood dogs. Buck and Curly also met 2 other dogs, Spritz and Dave. Spritz took Buck's food, so Buck didn't like him. Dave was sad and unfriendly and wasn't interested in anything. He only wanted to eat and sleep. Day after day, the weather got colder. Then they arrived in Alaska, and François took the dogs off the boat. Buck walked on snow for the first time in his life. Chapter 2: The Laws of the Wild. Buck's first day in this new, cold country was very bad. There were a lot of dangerous men and dogs everywhere. This wasn't a sunny, easy life. Here, there was no rest. Buck had to be careful and he had to learn quickly. These dogs and men weren't from the south. They were wild, and they followed the law of the club. Buck's first new lesson in this cold place came quickly. Buck and Curly stood near a store in one of the camps. A new dog walked past them. Curly wanted to be friendly, so she barked quietly. Suddenly, the other dog turned around and attacked her. He hurt her face very badly. Many other dogs saw the attack and ran quickly to the two dogs. They stood and watched quietly. They all looked excited and interested, and Buck didn't understand. Curly was very angry, so she jumped at this strange, unfriendly dog, but the dog attacked her again and jumped away quickly. Curly couldn't attack the other dog because he was very fast. Suddenly, he pushed Curly over and she fell on the ground. The other dogs ran at her and Curly barked with pain. But she couldn't stand up and the other dogs attacked her again and again. Buck couldn't move. Dogs in California never fought in this way. He looked at Spritz and Spritz laughed. Then François jumped into the center of the crazy dogs and hit them with his club. He and 3 other men with clubs quickly moved the dogs away. It all happened very fast, but in those 2 minutes, Curly was dead. Buck never forgot this attack. Spritz looked at Buck and he laughed again. From that time, Buck hated Spritz more than anything in life. But then, Buck had another surprise. François put a harness on him. "I know you don't like this, Buck," said François. "I know it's new and strange for you, but you have to wear it. Then you can pull the sledge." Buck didn't like this new thing around his neck and he didn't like pulling the sledge. But François hit him when he did something wrong, and Spritz attacked him when he didn't run very fast. François shouted, "March!" and Buck had to run quickly. He then shouted, "Ho!" and Buck had to stop. In this way, Buck learned to pull the sledge. "These are very good dogs," François said to Perrault. Buck pulls very hard and he learns very quickly. In the afternoon, Perrault bought 3 more dogs, Billy, Joe, and Solex. Billy was a very friendly dog, but Joe was unfriendly. Solex was the same. He wasn't interested in anybody or anything. That night, Buck had another new problem. He wanted to sleep in a warm, dry place, so he tried to sleep with the men. But Perrault and François were surprised and angry, and they threw plates and cups at him. Buck ran away from them and went back into the cold. He was very unhappy. He didn't want to sleep outside. The snow was wet and cold, and the wind hurt him. He looked for the other dogs, but he couldn't see them anywhere. Suddenly, the snow moved under his feet, and he jumped back. He started to bark angrily, but then he heard a friendly bark. Buck looked down and saw Billy. Billy was a little ball under the snow, and he was happy and warm. Then Buck understood. He quickly made a little bed under the snow, and he slept very well. In the morning, Perrault and François bought 3 more dogs. Now, they had 9 dogs, and they had to begin their trip. Buck was ready, and he was surprised by the excitement of the dogs. But he was most surprised by Solex and Dave. They were different dogs. Suddenly, they were happy, excited, and interested. They only loved 2 things: the harness and the work. The days were very long and hard. They went past woods and across many large icy rivers. It was difficult, but Buck worked hard, and at the end of every day, he made his bed in the snow and fell asleep very quickly. Buck was bigger than the other dogs, and he was always hungry. François gave him 1.5 pounds of fish every night, but Buck always wanted more food. Also, Buck didn't eat as quickly as the other dogs, so they often took his fish away from him. After many days, Buck started to eat as fast as the others, and then he started to take other dogs' fish too. One day, another dog, Pike, took some fish from the food box. Perrault didn't see it, but Buck watched carefully. The next day, Buck did the same thing. Buck quickly learned the ways of the wild, and now he could live in this cold, unfriendly place. He wasn't the same dog. He was quicker, smarter, and stronger. He was there in the north because Manuel wanted money and men wanted gold. Now a new life began for Buck. He was a different dog, a wild dog. On the cold, quiet nights, Buck looked up and howled at the dark sky. Chapter 3: A Bad Fight. This new, wild animal in Buck was strong, but Buck's new life was very dangerous. He never fought with the other dogs, but Spitz hated him. Spitz was the most important dog. He knew the sledge best. He always taught the new dogs to work hard, and the other dogs were afraid of him. He was the strongest, the most intelligent, and the most dangerous. He wanted to fight with Buck because every day Buck got stronger and more dangerous. But Spitz had to be the best, so he had to kill Buck. One cold, windy evening, they stopped next to the river. Buck was very tired, and he quickly made a warm bed in the snow. He wasn't happy when François shouted, "Buck, come, eat your fish." He didn't want to leave his warm bed, but he was very hungry, so he ran to the food box and quickly ate his dinner. But when he turned around, he saw Spitz. The other dog was in Buck's bed. He looked at Buck and laughed. Buck barked at him, and the wild animal inside him went crazy. He quickly jumped at Spitz. Spitz was very surprised because Buck was never angry. François was also surprised when the two dogs started fighting. "Fight him, Buck! You can win!" shouted François. "Get him! Get Spitz, that bad dog!" But the fight never finished because Perrault shouted. Everybody heard the noise of Perrault's club and the cry of a dog. The camp was suddenly full of strange, thin dogs. There were 80 or 100 of them, and they wanted food. The two men hit the dogs with their clubs, but the dogs didn't leave. They found the food box, and they went crazy. The noise was very loud, and the sledge dogs were afraid. The strange dogs finished the food and then attacked the sledge dogs. They hurt them very badly. They hurt Dolly's neck and cut Dub's leg. They took out Joe's eye and almost cut off Billy's ear. Billy cried in pain and ran away over the icy river. The other sledge dogs followed Billy, and they all looked for a quiet place to sleep. In the morning, the dogs walked slowly back to the camp. "Oh, my friends," said François sadly, The dogs were in a lot of pain and they looked very bad. Maybe you will go crazy because those dogs attacked you. Maybe you're crazy now. What do you think, Perrault? No, they will be fine, said Perrault. We have many days of work, so the dogs have to be all right. But the dogs weren't all right, and one morning Dolly went crazy. She stopped in front of her harness and sat down. She howled loudly. Then she looked at Buck and jumped at him. Buck was afraid. He didn't know any crazy dogs, and he liked Dolly. He didn't want to see this. He quickly ran away from Dolly, but she was only one jump behind him. He ran through the trees, across some ice, and back to the river. Dolly barked crazily behind him, but she couldn't catch him. Buck, come here, boy. Come to me, shouted François. Buck turned it and ran back to the camp. He was very tired now and had a lot of pain in his legs. I'll have to help Buck, thought François, and he found his club. Buck ran past him and François's club came down very hard on Dolly's head. Buck stopped and fell near the sledge. Spitz saw Buck and quickly attacked him. But François saw this and he hit Spitz with his club many times. Spitz is a dangerous dog, said Perrault. He really hates Buck. One day he's going to kill him. But Buck is more dangerous, answered François. I always watch him and I know. One day he will get very angry and he will eat Spitz for dinner. He will kill him easily, I know it. The weather got warmer and the trip got very difficult. The dogs couldn't fight. There was no time. The ice got very thin in some places and the sledge broke through it many times. One time, when the ice broke, Buck and Dave fell into the icy water. They were almost dead. When the two men pulled them out, the men made a fire and the dogs had to run around it very quickly. They had to get the thick ice off their coats. Another time, Spitz went through the ice and pulled the other dogs in too. Then the ice broke behind the sledge. Perrault had to climb up a high rock next to the river very quickly. He took the rope from the dogs' harnesses with him. Then he pulled the dogs out of the river and onto the rock. With the dogs' help, Perrault then pulled the sledge onto the rock. François climbed up after him. Everybody was very cold and very tired, but they couldn't stay up on the rock. They had to get back down to the river. So they walked to the end of the rock and slowly and carefully, François and Perrault took the dogs back down. They only went a half of a kilometer that day. Perrault wasn't happy because this trip was too slow. So on the good days, the dogs had to work long hours. But Buck's feet weren't as hard as the other dogs' feet. In sunny California, he never had to walk on cold, hard ice and snow. So now he walked with a lot of pain. One night, he couldn't get up and eat his fish. François looked at Buck's tired feet. He wanted to help him, so he cut off the tops of his boots. He made Buck 4 little dog's boots. Here, Buck, François said kindly. This will help you. Buck loved his new little boots and he was happier after that. One morning, François forgot about Buck's boots. He harnessed the other dogs and then called Buck. But Buck didn't go to his harness and he didn't get up. Perrault and François found Buck and they laughed. Buck was on his back with his 4 feet up. François put Buck's boots on. Then the dog happily got up and walked to his harness. He really is a crazy dog, Pero laughed. After many more days on the river, they arrived in Dawson. It was a great day, and everybody was very tired. There were men and dogs and sledges everywhere. Every day the dogs ran up and down the streets and pulled wood and gold for the men. The dogs worked very hard. They did the same work as horses, and every night at 12 and at 3 the dogs howled at the night sky. They sang their strange song, and Buck loved to sing with them. It was a very old song, a song from a younger world. And when Buck howled, he howled with the pain of his wild fathers. 7 days later, they left Dawson. The dogs were strong now, and the fighting quickly began again. Buck had small fights with Spitz every day, and he always fought him in front of the other dogs. Now Buck was stronger and more dangerous than Spitz, and the other dogs could see this. They stopped liking Spitz. Other dogs began to fight with Spitz too. They weren't afraid of him, and they didn't listen to him. So the dogs began to work badly, and they didn't pull the sledge well. François got very angry at his dogs. "You stupid dogs!" he shouted, and he hit them again and again. But nothing helped. The dogs didn't stop fighting. One night after dinner, a dog found a small animal. The animal jumped up and ran away very quickly. The sledge dogs saw it and they quickly ran after it. Buck was in front of the other dogs. He was very excited. He wanted to catch the animal and kill it. He ran and ran, but the animal was always one jump in front. Buck was very happy. Spitz quietly left the dogs and ran a different way. Buck didn't see him. Suddenly, Spitz jumped out in front of the animal. It couldn't turn around, and Spitz's big teeth killed it quickly. The other dogs howled and barked, but Buck didn't bark and he didn't stop. He ran at the white dog, and Buck and Spitz began their last dangerous fight. Spitz fought very well, and he attacked Buck again and again. Buck tried to push him onto the ground, but Spitz always jumped away very quickly. After some minutes, Buck was in a lot of pain. He had many cuts, but Spitz was fine. Buck was very tired, and the other dogs watched him carefully. Then Buck jumped at Spitz again. His teeth closed around Spitz's leg, and Spitz cried loudly. With a quick jump, Buck broke Spitz's leg. Spitz was now in a lot of pain, but he tried hard to stand up. Then Buck started the last attack. He could see and feel the other dogs. They waited and watched. They wanted one of the two dogs to fall. Buck jumped up and hit Spitz hard. Spitz cried and fell. The other dogs quickly attacked him. Buck sat down and watched. He was very tired, but he felt good, because now he was the most important dog. Chapter 4. The New Boys. "Hey, what did I say? I was right. Buck is a very dangerous dog," François said the next morning. He couldn't find Spitz anywhere, and Buck had many cuts on him. Perrault looked at Buck's cut and said, "Yes, but Spitz fought hard." "And Buck fought harder," answered François. "Now the sledge will go faster. Without Spitz, there will be no more problems. I know I'm right." Then Perrault put the bags onto the sledge, and François put the dogs into their harnesses. Buck walked to Spitz's harness and waited. But François didn't see him and brought Solex to the same place. Buck jumped at Solex angrily, and Solex had to move away. Ha! François laughed. Look at Buck. He killed Spitz and now he wants his job. Go away, Buck, he shouted. But Buck didn't move. Then François pulled Buck by his neck and put Solex in Spitz's harness. Barked angrily, but he moved. Solex was afraid of Buck and he didn't want to make Buck angry. So, when François turned around, Buck easily pushed Solex away again. François was angry now. Buck, you're a bad dog. You move away now, he shouted, and he took his club. Buck remembered the man in the red shirt and he walked away. When François brought Solex back, Buck didn't bark. Okay, now you, Buck, come here and get into your harness, François said. But Buck walked away from him. François followed, but Buck didn't stop. François looked down at the club in his hand. Oh, I understand. You're afraid of this. All right, I'll put it on the ground. Look, now, come to me. But Buck wasn't afraid of the club, and he didn't go to François. He wanted to be in Spitz's harness. He was the best dog now, and he didn't want to go back to his old harness. He walked away again. He didn't leave the camp, but François couldn't get near him. After an hour, François sat down. He looked at Perrault and smiled. Then he looked back at Buck. Okay, Buck, you win. And he took Solex out of Spitz's place. Buck laughed and walked to the sledge. François put him in his new harness. March! François shouted, and the sledge started to move. François watched Buck carefully. I don't think Buck can do Spitz's job, François thought. But he was wrong. After some kilometers, François thought, wow, Buck is better than Spitz. He is faster, stronger, and more intelligent than Spitz. Spitz was the best dog, but now Buck is better. Buck quickly stopped the fighting between the other dogs. He was the new boss now, and the other dogs were afraid of him. They listened to him and worked hard for him. François and Perrault were surprised and very happy. Buck is the best sledge dog in the north, François said. Somebody will pay $1,000 for him. What do you think, Perrault? Yeah, you're right, he said. Perrault was very happy with Buck's work too. Perrault was also very happy with his tip. The ice was hard and there was no new snow. It wasn't too cold. Every day, for 14 days, they ran 20 kilometers, and at the end of the second week, they could see Scarquois. But when they arrived at Scarquois, François and Perrault's plans changed. They had to leave Scarquois and the Yukon. They had to sell the dogs quickly. François put his arms around Buck's neck and he cried. Buck never saw the two men again. A Scottish man bought the sledge dogs. He and some other men worked for the Canadian Mail Company. They carried people's letters to them. The next day, they took the sledge back to Dawson, and it was hard work for the dogs. The sledge was very heavy, and the snow was very thick. Buck didn't like this new job, but he always worked hard, and the other dogs had to work hard too. On this trip, Buck only liked one thing. He liked to sit by the fire at night. Before he went to bed, he often thought about Curly and his fight with Spitz. Sometimes he remembered Mr. Miller's house in California, but he wasn't sad. He didn't want to go back to Mr. Miller's big house and the warm sun. He had a new home now and a new life. This life was hard but good. After many more days and nights, they arrived in Dawson. Now the dogs were very tired. They were very thin, and they wanted a long rest. But they only had 2 days rest, and then they had to start again. The dogs couldn't run fast, and the men weren't happy, and it snowed every day, so the sledge got heavier and heavier. It was the dogs' third trip back to the scarecrow, and day after day they got weaker and weaker. Dave had the biggest problem. Sometimes the sledge stopped suddenly, and Dave cried with pain. The men looked at him carefully, but they couldn't find the problem. Something was wrong inside Dave, but they couldn't help him. After 3 days, Dave was very weak, and he fell to the ground in his harness many times. The Scottish man stopped the sledge and took him out of his harness. He wanted to give Dave a rest, but this made the dog angry. Dave was in a lot of pain, but he had a job. It was his work, and Dave hated to see another dog in his harness. The sledge started to move again, and Dave ran next to the other dogs. Running was very difficult in the thick snow. He cried and barked with pain. He was also very weak, and he fell down in the snow. He howled sadly and started to walk slowly behind the sledge. The dogs had to have a short rest, so the men stopped. They watched Dave. He walked slowly and carefully to the sledge. He stopped next to Solex and didn't move away. One man said, "Some dogs die because they can't work. Sledge dogs love their work, and when they can't pull the sledge, they don't want to live." The Scottish man listened and then said, "I think Dave is going to die, but he can't die in his harness. Then he'll die happily." So the men put Dave back into his harness, and the sledge started again. Dave was happy in his harness, but the pain was very bad. He fell many times, and one time the sledge went over his legs, but he stayed in his harness, and night came. The men stopped and made their camp. Dave fell down in the snow next to the sledge. They gave the dogs their fish, but Dave couldn't eat. In the morning, Dave couldn't get up. He tried to go to his harness, but he couldn't move his legs. The men waited for a short time, but then they had to leave. The sledge moved away from the camp, and Dave howled sadly. The sledge went behind some trees, and the Scottish man stopped the dogs. "I have to help Dave," he thought. "He will die slowly in the cold snow, and I don't want that. He was a good dog." He walked back to Dave, and the other men stopped talking. Then they heard the sound of the gun. The Scottish man came back quickly and shouted, "March!" The sledge moved away fast, but Buck knew, and every other dog knew. They understood the sound of the gun, and now Dave had no more pain.